Good morning, good afternoon, and good day wherever you may be joining us from. Welcome to another edition of the Digital Download. I got it, folks. The longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live. Now globally syndicated on TuneIn Radio through IBGR, the world's #1 business talk, news, and strategy radio network. Today, we're understanding how pear-shaped motivation outperforms. We have a special guest, Simon Hartley, to help us with the discussion. Founder and CEO of Be World Class Group, Simon has extensive experience in elite sports psychology, helping individuals and organizations achieve their best. But before we bring Simon on, let's go around and introduce ourselves. While we're doing that, why don't you in the audience reach out to a friend, ping them and have them join us. We strive to make the digital download an interactive experience, so audience participation is highly encouraged. All right, with that, introductions. Adam, would you kick us off, please?
Hi, everybody. I'm Adam Gray. I'm co-founder of DLA Ignite, and just the title of this particular show had me hooked. It's a fantastic title. So I'm thrilled to be here, and a very elite bunch of us today. So it looks like there's just
right. Thank you for that. And Tracy, good morning and welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I will take the eliteness. That sounds fun. Also, I love pears, so I'm super excited to see where this episode goes. I'm Tracy Borison, owner of TLB Coaching and Events, where we're trying to bring authenticity back to the marketing industry. I wish it wasn't such a project. It's a pretty big project. Yeah, and I'm super excited to be part of this Elite Four, which is kind of fun because if we're talking about sports methodology, then it's good to be in the top 4.
Especially with the Olympics coming up. This will be interesting.
It's true. Although I will say, for those of you who don't know, I'm Canadian, and Canada always performs pretty dismally in the Summer Olympics.
You do okay in the Winter Olympics, though.
Yeah, we're a Winter Olympics country. But
well, it's winter all year round, though, right? All right. Excellent. And myself, I am Rob Durant, a founder of Flywheel Results, a proud DLA Ignite partner. And I, too, am excited for today's topic. As I said, this week on the Digital Download, we'll speak with Simon Hartley. With more than 2 decades of working with top-tier athletes and organizations, Simon will share his unique insights into human psychology and motivation, providing valuable lessons for anyone looking to elevate their performance. With that, let's bring him on. Simon, good morning and welcome.
Hello, good morning to you. Good afternoon to those of us this side of the water.
Yes, thank you. Simon, let's start by having you tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So my background is sports psychology, working with sports teams and athletes traditionally, helping them win medals and pick up trophies. But I discovered, and it's probably about 20-ish years ago, that I discovered sports psychology is probably the wrong term. Really, it's human psychology. And I discovered that whatever works with athletes works with anybody. It's the same stuff. It's human stuff, not sports stuff. If it works with a sports team, it'll also work with any team. So more recently, I've been applying what I still think of as sports psychology outside of the world of sport as well. It's got a really generic application.
Excellent. Simon, I wanted to start with a foundational question. What do you mean when you say motivation is pear-shaped?
I might disappoint Tracy here because it's not really to do with the fruit at all, although I like pears as well. PEAR is an acronym, and I found over the years that simplicity sometimes takes a very long time to find. And for many years, for many years, I've been asking people not why do you come to work, because if you ask that question, it's a headline question. You tend to get a very simple answer: I need the money. We've got kids to feed, need to keep a roof over our heads, all of that sort of stuff. If you ask a slightly different question, why do you come here and why do you do this stuff with us? Then you start to understand why people do what they do. And I've been interested in why people do what they do, what motivates them, what drives them, but particularly within a professional context, what drives them within their workplace. And when I asked that question initially, I thought I was getting hundreds of answers back. I'd hear people talking about, we make a difference. I really enjoy the team that we've got. I love winning. I love that sense of achievement. I need to get paid, or I love the luxuries, or I want the security, whatever it is. Hundreds and hundreds of different answers. And it took me a long time. It took me probably 15, 20 years to figure out that actually there were only 4 answers in a slightly different guise. So the acronym PAIR essentially it categorizes all of those answers. So the P of PAIR is purpose. Lots of people will talk about coming here because we make a difference, because we change lives, because this stuff that we do is important, it matters. Maybe it has an impact on the world, it has an impact on society, and we understand why that's important. And there are lots of occupations that I've come across where people really aren't driven by the money. I mean, in the UK particularly, you probably wouldn't take up nursing if you were money orientated or money motivated. You probably wouldn't take up teaching on that basis either. There are lots of people that do incredible things within the voluntary sector. There's an organization based in the UK called the RNLI, Royal National Lifeboat Institute. There are lots and lots of people working on a voluntary basis who are risking their lives every day. They're not getting paid a penny. So they're not money orientated, money motivated. They're probably purpose driven. So purpose is one of the 4 main drivers of human motivation that I found, but it's only one. And if I was to sit down and have a conversation with Simon Sinek about his start with why principles, I'd say, I don't disagree with you. I just think it's too one-dimensional. Many people are driven by purpose, but lots aren't. And that's why it's one of the dimensions, but it's not all of the dimensions of motivation. So P is the first, enjoyment is the second, which is our E for PAIR. And that can be enjoyment from all sorts of angles. It doesn't necessarily mean we enjoy what we do. It could do. Some people do enjoy the task, but some don't. I mean, some people clean toilets for a living and things like that. They probably don't enjoy the task, but they might enjoy other elements of it. They might enjoy the team that they work with. They might enjoy the culture, the environment around them. For a lot of people, they enjoy the challenge of what they do. I've spoken to loads and loads of engineers who don't like easy stuff. If it's easy, it's boring. They want the challenging stuff. They want the difficult stuff. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's variety. Maybe it's being able to be creative. There are lots of elements that give us enjoyment in what we do. And for some people, that enjoyment's paramount. The A is for ambition and achievement. It's the understanding that we're really good at this. We might even be the best at what we do. We're improving, we're progressing. I'm progressing as an individual. The team's getting better. I'm getting better. We're performing at a high level. And there are a lot of people, and I found loads in sales, interestingly, who don't really care about what they sell. And they don't necessarily enjoy the process of selling, but they enjoy being top of the leaderboard. I know lots of athletes who have probably fallen out of love with their sport, but they haven't fallen out of love with winning. They still love winning. And so there are a lot of people who are A motivated, ambition and achievement motivated. And the final piece of our PAIR jigsaw, R, is recognition and reward. So it could be reward in a sort of fiscal sense. It could be dollars and cents, pounds, shillings and pence. It could be awards, not rewards. It could be prizes, things like that, or it could just be recognition. It could be the pat on the back, the thank you, that sort of sense we get that we're recognized for being good at what we do, and that people are grateful for it. So in combination, I've found that, honestly, everybody that I've asked this question to comes up with an answer that fits into those 4. So I'm starting to think if we understand these 4, it gives us a way of sort of gearing motivation. We can start to understand our own to start with. We can start to know how we're motivated primarily. We can understand other people's motivation, the people that we work with possibly. We can understand what's primarily driving them so that we can motivate them better. But we can also create a more motivating environment that works for everybody.
But it's really interesting that, so obviously, as you were listing those four main categories, I'm sure everyone on the show was thinking, yeah, and that's me. That's me. That I guess it's normal for everybody to be a bit of all of those. Nobody doesn't like being rewarded or recognised. Nobody doesn't want to do something without purpose. Nobody doesn't want a sense of achievement, although that may not be the primary motive. So do people have a very obvious primary motivator, or are you like, well, I'm a P and an A?
Yeah, and actually, your observation is spot on. I think a bit like personality type. If you look into personality type, there are four main personality types. We are all four of them, but to different denominations. So there will be one that's strongest in us, one that reflects us best, and it's the same with motivation. We're all driven by all four, but if we were really honest, we'd say one of them probably is a stronger driver than the others. And one of the ways that I find really helpful to understand it is to almost think, what's the acid test? If I took one of those away, how motivated would you be? If we took reward away, or we said, right, we're going to half your salary, or we're going to half your benefits package, or whatever, how much impact would that have on your motivation? For some people, they'd say, yeah, it probably would a bit, but not massively, because if I'm really purpose orientated and I still understand that what I do is important, what we do is important, you could double the salary, you could half the salary. It's not going to have a massive impact. It won't have a sort of life or death impact on my motivation. There are others, though. If this is your primary driver and we took that away, your motivation would dry up really quickly. If you were incredibly purpose driven, and actually your organization started to lose its sense of purpose, it started to become too bottom line focused, too ruthless about the pound, shillings and pence, or dollars and cents, and driven only by profit, you would probably think, do I really want to be here? I think I might find somewhere else. I think I'll do something else. It's the same if you're really driven by enjoyment and the environment around you isn't quite what it used to be. If it's not that really good, positive environment, if you haven't got a great team around you, if you don't enjoy the vibe, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, if that disappears and you're really E-driven, then you'd probably think, I think I'll move on. I'll look for something else.
So are people, because again, I've only got a very singular view of this, where if you've got, you've worked with many people, but I've always found when I've been introspective about myself, I've always found it really difficult to identify what my motivators are, because, as you said, we're all four of these things. Yeah. So, do you do it for the money? Absolutely, I do it for the money. Okay, well, you're not going to get paid this month. Okay. Oh, well, okay, clearly it isn't the month. Well, it is the month, but it isn't the month. And then for each of those things, it's like they're all important, and I'm sure they're all important for everybody. Each of those things. So is this something where it's possible to analyze yourself, or is it something where everyone around you is much better at spotting what type you are?
That's another really good observation. I think we probably have a decent view, but sometimes we need a way of scrutinizing ourselves. So I put this is both an assessment and a self-assessment tool around this. And it's so simple, I can't sell it. It's too simple. So you've got 10 blocks, call them 10 Lego bricks, whatever. You've got 10 blocks. As long as you've got one in each of the columns, one in P, one in E, one in A, one in R, you can put the others wherever you like, as long as it accurately reflects what motivates you. Now, the trick with 10 is you can't evenly space them. So you've got to decide. And some people may go 4, 3, 2, 1. Some people may go 3, 3, 2, 2. However you place them is up to you, but it has to accurately reflect what really drives you. Now, you may have one set, and if you ask somebody else, tell me what you think drives me. They may have come up with something different. That's fine in my view, because what it does is it opens up a brilliant conversation. Why do you say that? Why do you see that? And the thing about motivation, I think if you ask people, they won't tell you what really motivates them, and it's not because they're lying, it's because they don't truly understand it themselves. If you look at choices and decisions that they take and the actions that they take, that probably tells you what really motivates them.
I have a
Go ahead,
sorry,
Tracy.
finish, Simon, but like I have a question after that.
No, go.
So I'm thinking of an employee that I once had who was like very clearly to me a recognition, and not specifically from a like financial reward category, but from a like team recognition perspective. She did this, and I could see how that like lit her up when it would happen. And so as a leader, that was something I was like, okay, this is something I'm going to make sure that I can do for her, because while I can't always give raises and things like that, I can always give team recognition when things happen. So I think it's interesting to compare how people might self-assess themselves to how people outside might assess you. But my question is, have you seen that, like the motivations change for people? Like, do they change throughout a career, or do they seem to be like kind of, this is who you are and it stays pretty consistent through your existence?
Yeah, I think it does evolve. Actually, I think personality type evolves as well. I don't think that's fixed. What I have noticed is that changes in your life situation have an impact on your motivation. And I've seen people sort of who were quite reward driven when they first came into a workplace. They probably often come out of a university or education. They wanted the paychecks. They were interested in the commission checks. They wanted the luxuries. They wanted to buy themselves the car or get themselves the house or take themselves on holiday, whatever. And that motivation lasted for a while, but when they got comfortable, they needed something else. I notice it kick back in again some of the time when they become parents and they think, oh my God, we've got more mouths to feed. And then that kicks back in again. And often when people are in their sort of 50s-ish and they've got a few, in the UK we'd say a few quid behind them, a little bit of money behind them, they've maybe got a pension pot or whatever, a lot of them will say, I'm not doing this for the money anymore. I don't need the money anymore. I'm now doing this for purpose, or I'm doing it for that sense of achievement, or whatever it is. So there are fluctuations over time, and understanding when a major life event happens that our perspective may really change. I think during COVID, a lot of people, it almost shook. If we took our 10 blocks, it almost shook them for a lot of people, and they kind of landed back in different places because we reassessed things. I know that when we've been through some major life events, particularly when my wife lost her mum and things like that, we started to question, well, how important is the money really? Is that really what's driving us? Is that really important? Is there something else?
Are you familiar with Dan Pink's Drive?
Yeah.
He talks a lot about, money is a motivator only to a certain level and so on. And a lot of what you're saying resonates there.
And actually, when you dig under the surface, even of money, I don't think it's the actual quantum amount that's the issue for many people. I've worked in Premier League football where players get paid a fortune, and some of them still feel like they're not being paid enough. And it's because they're not comparing themselves to a teacher or a surgeon or a nurse or whoever. They're comparing themselves to another footballer. And they're probably saying, yeah, but I work harder. I create more for the team. I'm in the first team. I'm on the team sheet, all of that sort of stuff. And therefore, they're thinking it's all about feeling like you're fairly remunerated for what you do. So I don't feel like it's fair because I give more than they do and they get paid more than I do. So even when we dig under the surface of the reward element of it, we've got to understand what's really going on with people to know what's truly driving their motivation.
What happens when, say, you're a P working with a bunch of colleagues that are still in the A or the R type of mentality? They can't fathom that you don't think the way that they think. And typically we can't fathom that anyone thinks differently from us in that regard. How do you get along?
And this I think is one of the biggest traps for leaders, the biggest trapdoor that they fall down. They expect that their team are motivated in the same way that they are. So if they're massively purpose driven, they probably stand on their soapbox. They talk about purpose a lot. Purpose is really important. But if their people aren't purpose driven, it's not going to stick. It's not really going to have an impact on them. I know a lot of sales directors, managing directors, CEOs who are very, very reward driven. And they expect that incentives and commission checks and bonuses are going to motivate everybody. They don't. Not everybody's wired that way. And they're surprised when they increase the incentives and nobody cheers. And so we've got to understand that understanding our own is fine, but we need to understand how our people are wired, or else we're going to miss them motivationally. We're going to do some things we think are going to work and they just won't work.
And Simon, would you say in like the teams that you've seen, regardless of whether it's a sports team or a business team, that there will be people who are driven by each of the different categories? And so it's not really about creating a team that are all ambition driven. It's about being able to like have the practice of figuring out who fits where and creating a quote unquote reward package that includes all of the drivers of motivation.
And that actually is the shortcut answer here, that we can create an environment that works for everybody. We can create an environment that's got 4 strong pillars of motivation. So we've got a really good sense of purpose. We understand why we do what we do, why it's important, why it matters, why we have to do it well. We can also build a really great environment. We can take on great challenges. We can make sure it's fun, it's enjoyable, it's stimulating, it's varied. Give people creative license. We can do all of that stuff. We can have a really great sense of achievement because we know that what we do is great. We know we're getting better. We're developing ourselves. We're developing our people. We know that every day we're taking a step towards excellence, and we can make sure people are recognized and rewarded for what they do. It's not rocket science, but so often when I talk to leaders, business leaders, sports leaders, educational leaders, any field, I talk to them about, okay, let's have a look at your environment. What do you see? How strong are these pillars? The chances are that at least 1 or 2 of them have got some shaky foundations. They're not really there. We've probably paid attention to one of them, but we've sort of ignored the others. And it also, going back to our previous conversation, usually matches the motivation of the leader, who assumes that purpose is all important or rewards all important, whatever. They're following their own motivation. So they built a super strong pillar in that area and largely disregarded the others.
When you were talking about the leader and purpose driven, I immediately envisioned Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society standing on top of the desk. And all of the students there, yes, they bought into it, but imagine that in a work context where we've got this leader who's up there motivating, and the students are, yeah, we're all for that, but we have student loans that are due. And then I thought about Maslow's hierarchy. How does that play into effect where I am on the needs being met and serving my purpose and so on?
Well, going back to the previous conversation about the fluctuation between these, there are periods in our life where R is more important to us, the recognition and probably the reward bit is more important to us, which in Maslow's world would say, well, we're missing a step on our pyramid here. We haven't quite got that level of comfort that we'd like. We haven't got the security, we haven't got the financial stability, we haven't got the sort of the physical element sorted. So if we haven't got that, then we're probably not going to move on to the others just yet. Once we've got that one, then we might start looking at the others more. And equally, when the spotlight goes back onto it and we don't feel like we're secure, we'll probably be more focused on reward again.
Well, and I feel like in that scenario too, because I have a friend who talks about how like Maslow's hierarchy really should have been a circle and not a pyramid, which is an interesting perspective. But I think it's interesting from a motivator perspective because we all need that specific level of financial security, right? To pay for food and housing and things like that. But I don't know, and like Simon, you would know better than me, but my experience of that is that that's not necessarily still your like motivator, right? Like you're going to choose that, but that isn't the thing that like motivates you to do good work. It is just the thing you need at the base level of the pyramid. And I could still feel unmotivated at work because I don't have enjoyment, and enjoyment is my motivator.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, and again, human beings are all different. So you will see people who will take on probably a lower paid job to find an environment that they really enjoy, or that really develops them or pushes them. I can remember many, many years ago talking to a friend of mine who's a multiple Michelin star chef, and he was talking about a few decisions he'd made fairly early on in his career to take lower paid opportunities, to actually take a backward step in career development. So to go from a sous chef to a chef de partie, which is a move down, because he wanted to find a better environment, which was more enjoyable, that he felt more passionate about, but also that developed him more, so that he felt like he was improving as a chef, because those were more important than the paycheck. I mean, yes, he still needs to get paid, but he took a significant, in percentage terms, a significant drop in salary in order to get the development, the input, the enjoyment, the passion back. Because actually he knew that whilst it might be a backward step today, it's going to take him where he wanted to be. And he wanted to be the best chef he could possibly be. He'd heard about these Michelin stars, didn't quite know how to get one. But he knew that the Michelin star in its own right is great, but it's a sign that you're progressing, you're becoming a better chef. It's just, it's a little milestone that you pass. It's a badge that you get given along the way. It's not an end in its own right, from his point of view, but it's a sign that you're on the right tracks.
So I see a lot of people that kind of shift from job to job. They're moving between companies, either at their choice or at the company's choice. And a lot of kind of dissatisfaction in terms of their careers. So I guess that a starting place for you to really think about your career and your happiness at work is to understand what is it that drives you and motivates you. So how should somebody begin to think about that? What are their first steps in terms of thinking, okay, here's who I am, so to fulfill my potential and make me happy, these are the prerequisites for that?
So just by going through the 10 blocks to start with, I think that gives you a good framework. Then to ask yourself a couple of questions like, if E is strong, what is it that really drives your enjoyment? I know personally that variety is key. I know that challenge is key. I know that being able to have creative license is key. If I didn't have those, would I enjoy it as much? Definitely not. No. The team around me, yeah, that is important. But if you took those things away, I'd stop enjoying what I did. In terms of the purpose, I know that my real sense of purpose comes from knowing that what I do has a positive impact on others. If I can't see the positive impact it has on others, I'd start to get demotivated. I need to know, get that feedback that tells me the thing I did had a real positive impact on somebody else's life. Then I get that real sense of purpose. So when you kind of dig under the surface, you can understand that quite a lot about yourself and what really drives you. And then you can start to identify environments that are likely to match that, where you've got a really good fit between what really drives you and what's within that environment. And although I work for lots of clients, I work for myself, but I choose the engagements I take on. I learned many years ago to choose my clients carefully, choose the projects carefully, and I'm quite picky about what I take on and what I don't take on. I know that when I do engage with something, it's because I know it's going to be really beneficial for me and them. I'm going to really enjoy it. I'm going to bounce out of bed thinking, oh, this is, look at what I've got on today. It's fantastic. Look at these great people I'm going to work with. Rather than, oh God, do I have to? Well, I suppose I do because we've got bills to pay. That's not a great space for me to operate in. I won't ever be able to give my very best if I'm crawling out of bed rather than leaping out of bed.
I can't help it, but when you talk about the 10 blocks, I'm wondering what the best score is. I know that's the wrong mindset, but
Yeah.
what do you do when you encounter people that think like that?
So to me, the best score is the honest score. But I also think there's a real strength in having a strong foundation rather than just one strong pillar. Because one strong pillar, in my view, it might be strong, but it's also vulnerable. Because if something erodes it, and I've seen athletes who have got all of their chips, all their blocks stacked in the achievement column, and then they stop winning. Well, it doesn't take long for the motivation to disappear, because that's really what they were in it for. I've seen lots of salespeople who had all their blocks stacked in the reward column, and the economy took a turn. And their sales dried up. The commission check dried up with it. So did their motivation, because it was too one-dimensional. So to me, kind of good is honest, but good is also about having a real foundation to it, and being able to understand it enough so that you know before it dries up that it's vulnerable. So you can see the changes in the world around you and think, oh, that could impact my motivation.
And if I'm one set of numbers, but am willing to work on myself and improve, what's the set of numbers I should be working towards? Or is it more just try to have it more evenly spaced?
I think we can strengthen all of our pillars, and we can dial into these pillars more, probably just by being a bit more aware and a bit more intentional. So one of the things I do around purpose is to just remind myself why I'm doing what I'm doing, even on a task by task basis, that it's not just a thing to do on the list. There's actually a reason for it. There's an importance for it, that, this task matters. Doing it well matters. Just doing that, I find, really increases my sense of purpose. The E pillar, for me, one of the things I noticed, and I'll say I learned this the hard way, brackets, painful way. A few years ago, I wrote a fictional book, and I thought it would be relatively easy because I'd already written 8 books. What I didn't appreciate is that writing fiction is the reverse opposite from writing non-fiction. All of the rules that apply to non-fiction don't apply when you're writing fiction. In fact, they hinder you. So one simple example, if you're writing non-fiction, you tend to tell. If you're writing fiction, you're supposed to show but not tell. And I learned the hard way that I was an absolutely terrible fiction writer. So I wrote a draft. I redrafted it into a second draft. I thought it was pretty good. I sent it to an editor. I got some feedback, and he sent it back in an email. The subject line on the email read "book feedback brackets brace yourself," and his opening line was,
That's not the headline you want, really, is it?
It's really not. No, I knew that there was something up when I read that, and then his first line said, "I'll give you the good news first. The good news is technically you have a story because you've got a start, middle, and end. That's where your good news finishes." And he laid into me with the feedback. I knew that he was going to be honest, and he really was honest. So I quickly started to learn the book's not great. I'm not a great fictional author. And I was finding it difficult. I would sit down and it was like wading through treacle trying to get these words out of me. When I read it back to myself, it didn't feel good. It didn't read well. So I went for a long time knowing that I was terrible at it and finding it difficult. And that's not a good combination for enjoying what you're doing. Over time, I started to increase my skills, know that I was better at it. And this happened over the course of years. So eventually I ended up publishing my 12th draft, and it took 7 years, the journey, from probably a 1 out of 10 when Greg first gave me that feedback to what's now sort of an acceptable level to publish. And I noticed that there are these sort of these spectrums that work together. So as my skills increase and I know I'm getting better at it, I start enjoying it more. So I'm rubbish at it usually goes with I hate it, and I'm great at it usually goes with I love it. And if we wanted to love it more, we'd probably need to feel like we were better at it. So if we can increase our skills, then we can get ourselves into a better place. So when you start to understand really what drives these, you can engineer some of them. The feeling of achievement, if we know we're getting better at it. The interesting thing about achievement is we can be getting better, but if we don't look for the improvement, we never realize it. And there are loads of people who have improved, but because they've never looked for their progress, they don't feel like they've improved. I describe it almost, I was talking to somebody who rowed across the Atlantic, and they said, when you're rowing across the Atlantic, most of your experience, when you look out of the boat, is to see just ocean for 360 degrees. And he said, without the GPS, you wouldn't know if you were just off the coast of the Caribbean or just off the coast of the UK, because all you've got is ocean, 360 degrees. Now, most people have got that experience of their own development. What they saw yesterday is the same as they see today, is the same as they see the day after. And in their experience, all they've got is challenges. They don't realize that the challenges have changed, and that they're not challenged by the things they were challenged by. They've got other stuff that's now tough. So they've got that view. And if we don't plug into the GPS, we don't realize how much progress we're making. It's that sensation of, I've still got a long way to go, but I haven't bothered to check over my shoulder to find out how far I've come.
So how do we plug into that GPS then?
By recognizing, looking for the progress. You have to look for it to see it. Sometimes you can get it through data. Sometimes it's through feedback. Sometimes it's just through observation. But because we don't look for it, we never find it. And the recognition and reward pillar, a lot of the time, again, it's about plugging ourselves in. For some people, their recognition is there. They get positive feedback, but they're so modest about it. It sort of ends up just falling off them. They don't actually absorb it and feel it. And I was talking to a group the other day about, it probably took me 20-ish years of working in a professional capacity before I stopped saying, when somebody gave me positive feedback, instead of saying, it's nothing, it was nothing, I actually just said thank you. It took me about 20 years to say thank you, that's really kind, I'm glad you enjoyed it. And beforehand, what I'd done is they offered me this little gift, and essentially I'd said, could you pop it down there on that table and I'll get to it later? Rather than saying, that's brilliant, thank you very much, and unwrapping it, that's lovely, thank you. Most people do that when they get compliments.
Right.
And so if we don't tune into that, we never get the R for recognition.
In the Dale Carnegie program, they make you sit and listen to people appreciating you, and all you're allowed to do is say thank you. Because you're right, people don't practice the skill of receiving appreciation. And it was like really interesting exercise because everyone was super uncomfortable. And you have to practice being comfortable, which is crazy to think about, like how many of us are actually uncomfortable with receiving appreciation. But that leads into really not being able to have access to that GPS.
Completely. So they're simple things. None of it's rocket science, but of course, like most great simple things, they're rarely done. People don't do that stuff very, very often.
Well, I think that's partly because they don't understand it, do they? When you go into the workplace, or actually just into the world in general, nobody explains the secrets. Nobody explains the rules of the game. So the very concept, as I'm older, potentially wiser in some ways, I see now how pivotal confidence and motivation is to getting people to do the things that they need to do for them to be successful, because part of what we do is coach people and hopefully empower them. When I was in my 20s, the idea of motivation, it's like, I pay you, you turn up, you do your work, you go home. It really is as binary as that. And the idea that I go to work and I don't actually have a particularly good time, suck it up. Either live with it or move somewhere else. You're not manacled to the place.
There's still work environments that are like that.
Yeah, but what's amazing is that and I think the modern environment is very different because people openly talk about purpose. And when people say, why should I come and work for you, it isn't, well, because I'm going to pay you every month. It's okay, and what else? Well, I'll pay you more if that's what it takes. No, you're missing the point. It isn't about the money, it's about other stuff. And I think that we're in a very different environment to where we were 20, 30, 40 years ago. But how do people learn about this stuff early on enough in their career? Because I'm sure you would be the first to admit, Simon, that if you knew when you were 20 what you know now, things would have panned out very, very differently, because you would have understood the rules of the game and what actually got results. And I've said this many times that I was amazed when I was first in business for myself. I was amazed that people who were not as good as me, not as clever as me, didn't work as hard as me, didn't have as good a product as me, were more successful than me. I thought, well, that's not fair, which of course it isn't, but it's not written anywhere that things are going to be fair. So how do young people learn about this stuff?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think there's more information available. So for those who are hungry, there's probably an easier way to find it than there's ever been. But how much of it's built into the curriculum? Not a lot. There really isn't still, and it's one of my big bugbears. Even, I mean, my kids have just finished school and just finished their sort of tertiary education, about to go off to university. They've got personal social health education classes. Apparently there's resilience training and stuff like that built into the curriculum still. It really doesn't, in my view, do the job for which it was intended often. It's probably more of a tick box exercise in most environments. So yeah, I think life experience is the ultimate teacher on this one. But if we can make the information more readily available so that people can find it, those who are searching probably will. But I think you still have to be able to search. And interestingly, one of the things that I sense, because my girls are part of the youngest generation, the emerging adults, they're actually not very good at searching things. I've noticed that because they access TikTok and things like that, things just sort of appear in their feed. They don't go looking for them. So they're not particularly good searchers, but those who are, there's more ability to find it. As this stuff starts to pervade through social media, maybe it becomes more mainstream. Maybe it is the thing that pops up in their TikTok feed. Ultimately, I suspect that's how they're going to learn it. They're not going to learn it at school.
But isn't that a really big issue that needs addressing? Because, what young people learn in school and formal education actually bears little alignment to what they need to know in the real world. And I remember many years ago, I was at a business networking group, and this guy that had been like massively successful stood up and he said, "These are my 4 secrets for success." That's like everyone sits forward. Okay, go on. And, number 1, smile. And then he explained why. Number 2, be on time. Number 3, say please and thank you. And number 4, always do what you say you're going to do. Now, these things are blindingly obvious. I'd rather do business with someone that's courteous and shows up on time and it's pleasurable to do business with them. But the full enormity of this stuff is not stressed to people. What you're taught in school is, here's how you solve a quadratic equation with a pencil and paper. but everyone in the world's got a smartphone now. More people have got a smartphone than a toothbrush. So a lot of these skills that are really valuable from an academic perspective have little or no practical application in the real world. And the skills that people do need, you know, you need to be able to express yourself. You need to be able to understand who you are. You need to understand what your strengths are. You need to be able to talk to people. You know, these are skills that are never taught. And so many, you know, we see so many people that are massively talented that they fail to believe that they are. And it's heartbreaking to see these people that are stuck to something that they hate getting none of these pair things, because they find themselves annexed in their career, unable to see just how valuable they are to the world.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I suppose when I look at one of the roles that sport plays, and particularly the academic sort of youth development programs around sport, there's an understanding that most athletes who are in those programs won't make it to the very, very elite level. You know, it's built to be a very, very steep pyramid. That's how it's designed. Statistically, in professional soccer in the UK that we call football, less than 1% of the kids who go through those academy systems end up making it as a really high level professional player. So I'm looking at, well, so what's the role of that system? And it's to develop people. You know, they might go on and play football or rugby or whatever they go and play. They might be athletes, but they might not be. And they probably won't be if you look at the statistics. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't give them a lot of other education that they probably won't get at school. So fortunately, athletes who do come through those systems end up having quite a lot of education around sports psychology, how to manage your mind. And actually, when you look at kids who come through those systems as opposed to kids who don't have that experience, a lot of them, when they come out the other end, have probably got more practical tools than the kids who have only studied the academic educational curriculum.
And I guess
there's... Sorry.
I was just going to say, I guess also if you're in like a mega competitive thing like a sporting arena, it also teaches you resilience, because you're not always going to be told yes. You're not always going to be a winner. And dealing with the disappointment is so important throughout life, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've I've often reflected with coaches that one of the things that we do here is we can teach people how to lose as well, because they're going to lose in sport, they're going to lose in life. That's going to happen. You know, one of our big jobs here is to help them when that does happen. You know, when we're looking at developing people, and one of the projects that is sort of about 7 years in at the moment with a big football club in Europe, is all about helping them not only recruit on character, but develop character in their players, so that we not only develop good footballers, but also really good, solid human beings. Human beings who could go on and be successful in anything, really.
This is something that was coming up for me in this conversation, because I think a lot of times we put pressure on our like formalized systems to be able to deliver everything. We expect that the education system can deliver all of these things and be as quickly evolving as the human race actually is, which I think to date we have proven is not true. Systems are much slower than humans. But there are a lot of humans who have this type of knowledge, who are listening today, who are like, oh yeah, this is great. Like, and we all have our ways that we can share that with people. We can share it in a social media post. We could also, one of the things that I have a 6-year-old, and so and I'm all about authenticity. So these types of things are things that we practice at home, and they're also things that he takes to school. And sometimes we've had scenarios where he's like, no one else gets this, and I'm like, yeah, well, no one else has learned it yet, so like we can share it. But I think, especially from a giving this gift to the next generation, I think it's interesting for each of us just to look at how can we ask these types of questions, right? Like, as a hiring manager, could you ask questions about what motivates people? Even for me, right, with kids in the playground, and maybe 6-year-olds don't quite know how to answer that question in that framing, but there's things like you see them run a race, and there's kids who want to win the medal, and there's kids who want to cheer for their teammates, and there's like there's a lot of this that is observable, which we talked about at the beginning. And I think it would be interesting for everybody to take away and just be like, well, what's one way I could help people understand what their motivation is? And we could make a pretty big impact that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And fortunately, this stuff isn't massively complicated. It's pretty simple stuff. So it's not difficult to absorb ourselves. It's not difficult to share with other people. It's not difficult to get that understanding to translate to a much wider audience. So yeah, fingers crossed, we'll all start to understand our own motivators a little bit more, and also appreciate how other people are motivated and be able to help them, especially when they're in times when they might be finding things tough.
Simon, you work with a lot of world-class sports organizations, and you said recently you've worked with corporations as well. My gut tells me that when you're working with corporations, let's say the general public, you're going to have a wide variety of people motivated by different things, different sets of 10 Legos, if you will.
Yeah.
How much variety do you find with world-class sporting organizations? They've all gone through those academies and so on. Are they very similar in their motivations? And is that similar or different to top performing non-sports organizations?
Yeah, I think that there are patterns within sport. I would tend to find a lot more people who are motivated, their achievement ambition motivated in elite sports environments, and not just on the playing side, on their coaching and management side as well. That would tend to be a regular trait with elite sports environments, and it's one that we've got to be quite careful of, because as I said earlier, if everybody's motivated by winning and we're not winning, then it could cause us problems. We might need to tap into other elements of pair in order to keep the motivational environment high. So especially if we, for a lot of athletes, there's quite a long road that you have to take before you get to that point where you can genuinely win at the highest level. It'll take years and years and years in some cases to get to that level where you're winning consistently at the level that you want to be. So understanding how we get that motivation for the long haul, as I call it, and keep motivation stable and enduring. Not for some people, it's sort of it's a little bit like a firework. It's really bright for a couple of seconds, loads of motivation for a couple of seconds, and then it's gone. That's not going to work in most environments. Not if we want to be successful. We need stable and enduring motivation that's not going to fluctuate massively depending on whether we win today or lose today, and it'll keep going for years and years and years. That's the kind of motivation that's going to take us into the higher echelons.
Brilliant.
So many more things we could dig into, and I know earlier in the episode you said you could not monetize because it's so simple. We'll talk offline. I see a way to do exactly that. Simon, this was great. Where can people learn more? How can they get in touch with you?
So I much prefer, if possible, to actually connect with people. I think you and I connected on LinkedIn. I love connecting on LinkedIn because you can actually spark up conversations that way. I'm also on X as World Class Simon. So you can follow me there, or YouTube channel, Simon Hartley on the YouTube channel. But yeah, I much prefer to connect where possible. So if anybody's keen on connecting, that works for me.
Excellent. Thank you. We now have a newsletter. Don't miss an episode. Get show highlights, beyond the show insights, and reminders of upcoming episodes. You can scan the QR code on screen or visit us at digitaldownload.live/newsletter. On behalf of our panelists, to our guest, and to our audience, thank you all, and we will see you next time on The Digital Download.